Thank you for tuning in to my channel. I'd like you to give me the benefit of the doubt for a moment before you automatically presume that because I start with um, my own point of view, that I am necessarily and inherently not um, formulating this broadcast with intent to do well by all of us in the community. But I think you would agree that when it comes to the unhinged things that keep happening, there seems to be more and more conspicuously a method to the madness. And what I would like to do is uncover, look under the hood to see if there might be things that by becoming knowledgeable and aware about, we might be able to, figuratively speaking, arm ourselves with some kind of defense. And when I say that figuratively, I don't own any weapons. But understanding what it is that might be happening might help us, by our knowledge, survey the situation and keep ourselves safe with awareness. So, what I want to begin with is the fact that as a deaf man, dealing with Queen Elizabeth's entourage, people like Donald Trump, Robert Fripp, I'm not engaged in a situation that is particularly analogous to Brown versus Board of Education. In Topeka in 1954, it was shown by psychological research that young black children were unjustly being framed with a negative self image. And this led to the outlawing of segregated schools. I, by contrast, have been made to feel grossly inferior and dehumanized by a structural comparison to John Lennon that is illegitimate. But it hasn't been on the books exactly, it's been in our culture. So it's a slightly complicated situation. What I present to you is that without understanding the thinking processes that are going on, it's not going to be possible to deal effectively with things like the war in the Ukraine and the incident in Uvalde, Texas, because I believe I can show that these incidents are interrelated in the mentality that's organizing them and the project that is ongoing with regard to them by a powerful group of people who feel that the United States of America is unfit for sovereignty. Now, if I moved back into the study of myself, I would be taking one avenue towards this. That would be a legal avenue pertaining to my lawsuit against Queen Elizabeth in the federal courts, which is pending. But let's take a look at something outside of me for a moment. Let's look at the way the news is being made into a polarization between the Ukrainian forces and the Russian forces. What would it mean to be 100% behind the Russian government? Well, for one thing, it would mean sending um, poorly armed young men, unprepared for battle, into a war scenario they oppose against um, a group of um, furious and angry um, persons who were invaded with semi fascist tendencies, shoving your own into a hornet's nest in order to argue that they were isolated and pushed into despair and desperation. What would it mean to be 100% behind the Ukrainian forces? That would mean that taking no cognizance of the tax and spend, grossly inflated, climate poisoning turbine of arms race mentality by known liars who lied about the intentions of NATO, who lied about the intention of the anti ballistic missiles, who lied about what was happening in Iraq, and who killed many millions of innocent people pursuing those laws. That you 100% support them because you don't believe that the snipers who were shooting both sides during the uprising against elected member of the government who sympathized with and was negotiating loans from Russia at a time when Russia was being intellectually open to and receptive to European participation, um, because you don't believe anything was wrong, and the unexplained murder of over 10,000 Russian sympathizing people in Donbass and so on. So it's reasonable, I think, not to be 100% behind either one of these sides. Now, if you were to look at the way that the paradigm and parameter is adjusted to the United States of America, we see a situation at an elementary school in Texas where a performance massacre was put on by a chain of command to illustrate for us what we apparently consider not worth fighting for, the safety of children in schools. We consider not worth fighting for, the welfare and dignity of foreign Muslim society. We consider not worth fighting for. Um, is there some evidence that the Russians consider these things worth fighting for? Not really. I mean, the Russians, when they were most open to Europe, wanted to partner up with us in um, control and domination. But what is exactly does it mean to the West to subordinate Russian society? What does it mean exactly to subordinate anybody? Um, well, I think that if you were to say that NATO wants to do to Russia and that Russia should accept being done to them what Pittsburgh did to Jimmy Creary, what Pittsburgh did to Jimmy Creary and continues to do to his reputation, legacy with the help of Seattle and UW Dialectical. If you were to say that, I think, frankly, even General Westmoreland would laugh because it's the ideogram of Jimmy Creary that is used by Queen Elizabeth and her minions to justify saying that we are unfit for sovereignty. And so their notions, which include that one, must be adopted. Now, so you wonder, am I going to court to benefit myself? Yes, I am. I don't deny that. What they're posing is that I need to prove that I'm fit for sovereignty. No, I don't. I have many reasons for not having a car and not having, despite being a licensed driver. I'm glad that has the benefit of showing that you can live a fairly high quality of life in poverty without adding to your carbon footprint. But to be truthful, it's because I have a neurological injury. There are people who say that the deaf shouldn't be allowed to drive. Well, the deaf disagree with that. And I drove pretty well despite being deaf for a long time. But when I found out I had a neurological injury, the state of Pennsylvania authorities are so determined to hide how that happened that they gave me a license without reviewing it. I feel that it was unwise, and so I refused to drive. Likewise, I do not believe a person who is a victim of such a deranged um, act of criminal espionage is to put a neuroplasm as a neuroplastic upload to change the personality of the Jimmy C, which is index for Jimmy Carter, um, from George Bush's ship in the Navy, should be expected to live up to this war game. I don't think, in fact, part of my argument in court is that it was an illegal war game, that they took away by their methods my ability to surmise everything that needs to be surmised and set back um, my development. Now, I'm willing to participate in civic affairs, certainly. They were arguing that I should be like Socrates and be drafted into their experiment as a human sacrifice. That's how horribly Frankenstein they are. And Lewis Lapham set the chatter for UW Dialectical by saying, "What became of the president's senses?" Now we get into one of the grossest differences between my case and Brown versus Board of Education, which is that Brown versus Board of Education was a normative process supported by the NAACP. This is an abnormal process being promoted by members of the NAACP, illicitly, illegally, and cruelly. And I'll explain why. I can demonstrate that because you see, in Brown versus Board of Education, when they brought in the dolls and showed the psychology, the laws were changed. In this case, no matter what I prove, and I will prove, that will never change because this isn't about laws. This is about deriving satisfaction for fun from the criminally insane, which is part of the method of Queen Elizabeth and Donald Trump in this country. Now, I'm not just going to say that, I'm going to show that that is true. What became of the president's census? Okay, let's take a look at some things that are like the dolls in this case. Okay, Dr. Ralph Proctor has a homework assignment to look at things like Pinocchio and talk about the sexual connotations in children's fairy stories. You know, the growing nose is like the boy lies because he's shy about the erection. Okay, now as a child, you don't know that. You don't understand that. There's childish psychology experiments actually that at a certain age, children can see something taken from out of a cup under a cup, and then the cup is put back and asked again, where is the ball now? And they think it's under the same cup. They don't have any concept of it having been taken out. They become confused and cry when they see that it's not there. But at some point, temporal perspective sets in, and children know the ball isn't under the cup anymore. Okay, so there's a there's a point at which the child's mind does not understand that there's can be read into sexual psychology and some of these shorter psychology. Whether it's intended or not can be argued, but it can be read into effectively as metaphors for these kinds of things. And the child doesn't understand that. So the idea that I could have saved John Lennon is built on a whole fabrication about the myth of super comprehension in a child, and they discount even that I was battered, tortured, and given a nerve agent and put under hypnosis. So, I mean, obviously, the whole fantasy of Peter Gabriel that there's some sort of hidden code of justice behind what they did is not only illogical, but it's criminally insane. It's an attack. So, what I present to you is that what happened in Uvalde comes from Tony Levin and Donald Trump's thinking processes. First of all, Uvalde is like Valentine's Day, Valentine's Day massacre. It's Ukraine, Valentine's Day massacre. And this is conceptualized in the way that they encrypted it. Another thing is that they have concepts that they see as consciousness. They say things like fair enough, and it has connotations to their wolf pack that everybody detects and picks up on, based on ideas of fluxus, Tamo de Jong, logotherapy, and Ouspensky's fourth way psychology. I'll give you an explanation for each of those. Fluxus is the idea that things repeat. Tamo de Jong believed that there were archetypes. One white person is as good as any other white person when it comes to getting even with white people. Logotherapy is the same basic idea. You go after an image, a symbol of something to settle the floating hemispheres of the hysterics. Ouspensky believed that, like cinema is two dimensionals and a metaphor for the three dimensions that we live in, or three dimensions is a metaphor for the fourth dimension, which they believe that they can plumb with their astral proboscis. Now, if you look at the Beatles, they didn't want to come to America until they were number one. When JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, was in the way. Well, with him out of the way, they were the Saxville Bagginses triumphant, kicked their feet up on the table, fart in the punch bowl. There's no limit to how destructive they could possibly be. They were as destructive as they could possibly be. And back in the USSR, back in the KGB, sell out everything with this ton of conscious irony. And you're supposed to say, oh, well, that's ha ha ha, because it's the Beatles. Well, the point is, of course, they were mongering um, the idea that it was sarcasm, when in reality, they were actually out to burn us. Like, if you look at what they did to me, okay, conscious irony, right? Sarcastically saying something, and then they pounce on it with a terrifying KGB forces of torture and cruelty as true when they know it's not. They all knew that I wasn't um, in any way invasive of Leslie Katz's personal privacy when we dated. I was completely hands off. A couple years we were together, and she was still a virgin when we broke up. I never left a bruise on her body. I never harmed her, and they all knew that. Yet they said that fact proved right because they just said it. So like for example, they brought in this woman, which was a computer designator, Marianne Sarkis, when Carbonell made his carrot tape. Okay. And Marianne was a girl who said, I was concerned about Jimmy because he's older than most of the people in college and he doesn't seem to be getting anywhere and he's deaf. And Sarkis was that they knew that the carrot tape was being sarcastic. It was an implant from childhood that they ran through neuroplasm, pulled out in Senegalese to vomit it out, right? So they combine the serious thing. He's becoming alienated. He didn't adjust properly because he's deaf and nobody's helping him with the sarcasm. So, and it's MS from Martin Sheen, and it's manuscript because they have this manuscript in the background that they're ha about. So you begin to see the mystery workings of auto suggestion that are encrypted in the minimal pairs. Like Clint Hill came to the rescue of Jackie Kennedy, and now we have Hillary Clinton. That's a minimal pair, and you're supposed to say, "Oh, well, I don't see any similarity between those things." Michelle Lubin was the first girl to come on to me by Hole in the Iron Gate. We Shall Overcome becomes Me Shall Lubin. Lubin is like a metaphor for oil and virginity, right? You're not supposed to see that. Ronnie and Casper attacked me. Ronnie Zinski. You're not supposed to see that. You know, there's a whole roster of logos in the script that you're not supposed to see. You're not supposed to see Valentine's Day in Uvalde. Okay. So you're not supposed to see any of the things that fall together as um, proof that we lack the concept that are necessary to understand things that aren't even there. Okay, I mean, they're sort of hypno freaky when it comes to final arguments. But they used a woman named Carrie Sylvester. Carrie is the woman who gets beaten up so much that she finally explodes, like Putin, you know. And Sylvester is the resistance. You fight yourself, fight yourself, fight yourself. And then the tea kettle goes off, right? So these psychopaths are a dishonor turbine of sorts. Like you have these terrifying anti-heroes from the Republican Party at a hearing about you voted. They're pulling up weapons and showing, "Want to see how it gets lower," all this stuff. And then if you say, "What are you, some kind of retarded psycho?" They're like, "Oh, you hurt my feelings. I'm gentle inside. I'm gentle inside. Don't hurt my feelings." You're fucking stepping on the memory of children who were just killed by making, light of these horrifying weapons you've been selling. Well, when I calmed down enough from the neurological violence inflicted on me by Europe when they attacked me in the neuroplasm, through my trust system for these people from Britain, I shuddered at how low their agent Rosa really is. But after Italy was mortified by the molecule, COVID 19, I call it the molecule, I wondered if she had any remorse. Now we have Uvalde, and still she shows none. What we want then is to understand how these gun cults address things that seem to us to be not worth fighting for. And in the end, I believe they're sending a message in the old George Wallace sense of sending a message. Only this time from their astral plane, it's about an arc, a multiculturalism of survivors. The rest of us, they just want to boot. And my feeling is we must resolve for ourselves not to yield on the central issues of our rights to know and our rights as people to have safety in the Commonwealth. Our problems with climate change are fossil fuel agencies, and we have the right to know why they have pushed it to this point. And the bottom line is even though they have these creepy, insidious messages that they're sending us about what to expect and what we must accept, in my final opinion, friends don't let friends get that message. We have to stick up for each other. So when they say you have to grasp that it can't be done any other way. They're sending a message. And I say, friends, don't let friends get that kind of message. We have to defend our children. We have to do it intelligibly. We can't have these ninnies from the Republican Party turning our mortification into another excuse for the rotten, stinking gun shows.